Hi, my name is Cody Moore, and excuse me, this is my presentation for my animal observation project. I'm exploring the active behaviors in hedgehogs. More specifically, I'm studying the behavior of the African pygmy hedgehog. They're native to Central Africa and Eastern Africa, a large section of Eastern Africa, and a little sliver of middle of Central Africa. They're exclusively nocturnal scavengers. They have very poor eyesight, but they make up for it in hearing and smell. Their smell is actually so good they can smell an insect 2 inches underneath the dirt, which actually makes them mostly insectivores. A lot of the times their habitats in grassy savannas and mix between like a savanna and a desert, kind of like the in between. They eat a lot of bugs, and they're also opportunistic omnivores, meaning that they'll just eat anything that's not nailed down and won't kill them. They have very high resistance to toxins. They're known to have eaten scorpions, spiders, and even just snakes alive. They're pretty cool. Um, it's also an endotherm, which means that it creates its own body heat and it doesn't get heat from the surroundings. It has to maintain an internal body temperature of some sort. Estivation. It's kind of like the second cousin to hibernation in the sense that it's not dependent on any sort of temperature or weather. It's mostly dependent on food. So if there's a huge food shortage and they're losing weight, they go to sleep for around like, well, not sleep. They're at a state of torpor. It's when their heart rates become very far few in between, and their metabolism slows down um, to a very slow pace. They usually don't uh, stay in this state for longer than 2 weeks, and if they usually do it, it's because they're about to starve to death. Um, it's not a behavior they normally do, and they normally don't do it in captivity. If they do it in captivity, it usually results in their death. So the African pygmy hedgehog that we're going to be looking at today is my pet Remy. Uh, Again, she's an African pygmy hedgehog. She's 6 months. Me and my girlfriend, we got her in right outside Raleigh, North Carolina. Um, she was born in captivity. She was raised in captivity. She was hand fed. She was held every single day. Um, so as a result, she's very acclimated to people. She's captive and tame, but she is not domesticated. Domesticated is something that you have to breed into an animal. You can't teach an animal to be domesticated. And we try to give her a healthy diet. They normally recommend cat food, but we also give her like a blend of insects, mealworms, crickets in her cage so she can forage around normally. And we give her flaxseed oil so the rough cat food is easier on her mouth. So the method I use is focal animal scan sampling. I collected data using an Excel spreadsheet on the computer I'm using to record this. Um, I used 30-second intervals and I collected 4 sessions of 15-minute data intervals. I did it for 4 consecutive nights. Every single night I did at the same exact time, so I did it. I started at 11:30 and then worked my way until 11:45 for 4 nights in a row. I would be sitting at her cage on a little miniature fold-out table, and I would turn my screen really low so it wouldn't interfere with her behavior at all. I was looking for the proportion of active behaviors versus the proportion of unactive behaviors around this time of night, to see when she was active, what was she doing, and how she just allocates her time in general. So the actual environment that she normally stays in her home, it's a pretty decent sized cage. It's comes fit with a running wheel. We made it ourselves, and a little plastic hut filled with like t-shirts and like various towels for her to burrow through, since they do like to burrow and dig, and various containers filled with like clippings that we hide bugs in, so she um she can search for them and scavenge, pretty much, which is their natural behavior. We have a heat lamp, and we keep the environment at a constant 78 degrees Fahrenheit. It varies from animal to animal. Hedgehogs in this case. Um, oh, I'm sorry. Some hedgehogs like it a little bit colder. Some hedgehogs like it a little bit warmer. It's a kind of feel as you go thing. And she always has water available, and she always has food available. So this is an ethogram I used. Um, as you can see, I marked the behaviors um, with the I denoted the behaviors with OM DC for defensive curling, OM for object manipulation, and I wrote the A for active and then the NA for non-active behaviors. So the object manipulation, sniffing, and locomotion and anointing I considered active behaviors, and all of the rest I considered non-active behaviors. So this is what I found. I collected a total of 121 observations, a large majority of which was locomotion. Uh, Normally, when I went over there, she was already awake and she was already running on her wheel. These animals are estimated to run between 10 to 15 miles every single night, around like 9 miles an hour. They're super active. They move around so much. Um, and that's already 60% of the observed behavior, which is a huge proportion, already being active. So the next largest proportions of her behavior was stopping and sniffing things, sniffing the air, sniffing like towels or what be it. That accounts for 20% of the behavior, which is already 80% of active behaviors, and there's like a negligible amounts of defensive curling, object manipulation, and eating. She didn't eat very often when I observed her. She was mostly moving around. So she's spent around 85% to around 88% of her time while I was observing her being active, running on her wheel, sniffing, moving stuff around, and eating. She's a very active animal. Um, so what this displays to me is foraging behavior, because I noticed a pattern. She would run a certain distance for a certain amount of time, and she would get off. She would smell. She would like sniff around, and then she would move things. And then after she is done with that, she would go back to her bowl, eat and drink, and then go back to her wheel, and then just keep on running. A very large percentage of the recorded observations was her being active. Um, which I'll explain that in the next slide. Some of the confounds and limitations that I experienced for this observation project. I didn't do an experimental design. I didn't get to change any variables. I did it at the same exact time each and every night. I was at the same exact place. So as a result, I don't have a control to kind of like compare this to, other than like the small amount of already recorded behaviors for hedgehogs, which isn't a lot. The literature is not very big or expansive at all. Um, she was not in her natural environment, and I was also close to the cage. At one point, you could see she was defensive curling once, and that was because I dropped something, and she heard the noise and she curled up into that ball. So that is another huge confound. Um, and there, and I forgot to mention this. There's no point in time where she wasn't visible. I could see every inch of her cage. I set it up like that on purpose. So some larger implications. One, uh, I did find a pattern like I was talking about. She would go on her wheel, run, sniff around, and then go eat. I feel like that's typical of foraging behaviors. Um, so these foraging behaviors were even apparent in a very confined space uh, compared to her natural environment. And it provided me with a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge with how to make and how to collect data with ethograms. And it kind of gives me a sense of appreciation for how scientific everything is with recording behaviors. So, like, if you like say like hibernation behaviors, I know it's backed up by raw data. There's a certain definition for hibernation, and it's not just something someone made up. Some other implications: hedgehogs are becoming very popular pets in North America, and I feel like this is expanding on literature that is very far and few between nowadays. For how many people have hedgehogs, it is very hard to find any reliable data on like how to raise one, how to care for one. A lot of people don't even know that hedgehogs can become pets. So I feel like again, me doing this expands the literature. Even though I'm not publishing, I can say word of mouth, and maybe that will help the collective kind of pet owners of hedgehogs improve and help understand what these animals need. So that's about it for my presentation. If you have any questions on how I made it, um, any questions I didn't answer that you may have, feel free to email me. Thank you for listening, and I hope you stay safe, and I hope to see you again next semester.